Hello, everyone. My name is Chantal Hofstee, and I am a clinical psychologist at Renew Your Mind. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about how is this lockdown impacting our social, emotional, and mental health, and what are some things that we can do to protect ourselves from those negative effects. Now, I am not a medical doctor. I cannot comment on the validity or the effectiveness of the lockdown. But as a clinical psychologist, I do think I can comment on what is this situation doing to us in terms of our well-being and our mental health and our emotional well-being and our social relationships. And I think it's really important to think about that and to talk about that. I think a lot of people that I speak to and clients are definitely noticing strong impacts. And I think when we understand why this is how we're feeling, it can help us to make sense of it. And it can help us to put in place some practices that will help protect our mental health and our relationships. Now, to understand what a lockdown that we are all in now is going to do to us, I think it's really important that we first of all understand that we are herd animals. We are social creatures. Probably 99.9% of humans have a group of people that they feel connected with and spend a lot of time with, whether it is a partner, whether it is children, whether it is friends, whether it is flatmates. It doesn't matter. Most people will have a core group of social relationships that they spend a lot of time with. And it has been like that from the start of the human race. So our brains are completely wired for connection, for social relationships, and it has a profound impact on our emotional and mental well-being when that is all of a sudden completely disturbed and changed from one day to the next, which is exactly what is happening. Now, most of us have this core group of people that we spend a lot of time with. For a lot of us, that would be a partner and or children. And then we have groups outside of that. You can see it as an onion. Like there is this ring, this core, like a circle in the middle, and then circles around that. So at the core, you might be a parent, might be a partner. A little bit more outside of that might be your extended family, being a daughter, being a friend, being a really good colleague. Outside of that is being part of a wider community group. And in normal life, a little bit like the tides, we go into our core group, and then we go out into our wider community. And then we have all these different roles that we play in each of these layers. And just like the tide goes in and goes out, so does normal life. In normal life, do we transition between our core group, and then we go out into those layers where we fulfill different roles, where we kind of use different social muscles. It's very different being a parent of a young child, for example, and then spending quality time with a friend. Being with the child requires different parts of your personality, different skills, different social relationship muscles. When you are with your partner, you're using a different side of your personality, different social muscles, different interactions, versus when you are at work with a colleague, or when you're talking to one of your neighbors or an acquaintance. Now, in normal life, this flows really naturally, and we go from our core group to our wider community, back to our core group, and then back into the wider community. We are the parent, the partner, the people that are for the people that are closest to us, and then we have time as a colleague, as a friend, as a community member, and then we come back to that close core of the people who are closest to us. And that is really good, because this way we can use different parts of our personality, different parts of our social skills, different parts of our social muscles as we fulfill these different roles who change as the days go. We come back to the center, and then we go out into the community, back to the center, out into the community. When we are in our core group, we use certain of these social muscles, and those get a break when we're in the wider community. When you are being a colleague, you're not using your parenting muscles. When you're being a daughter, you're not using your partner muscles, so to speak. And so those other roles that we play get a break. We get a break from that. Those muscles have the opportunity to recharge and to relax and not be used for a bit. Now, what happens during a lockdown is that all of a sudden this core really is all we have left. Our natural flow of going from the center to the outskirts has completely stopped. We are just in our core, in our bubble, whether that is with a partner, whether that is with children, whether that is with flatmates or parents. All of a sudden we are in this core, and this going out and coming back has stopped. And that has a profound impact on how we feel, how we emotionally and mentally feel, and our well-being, but also our relationships. Now, of course, a lot of us still work, and in that sense, you might say that we go out into those wider circles again. But what I'm hearing over and over again is that doing that through a screen does not have the same effect as doing that in real life. We might talk to family, we might talk to friends, we will spend time with colleagues online, but to the brain, it's like the oxytocin isn't happening. We don't actually get the same effects happening in our brain, which makes sense because even though we talk to the person that we normally talk to, the chemical reactions in our brain actually are different. Now, as a result of that, what I think is happening for a lot of people is that the relationships in that core become under pressure, because we don't get the break that going out into our wider circles gives us from being in that core. So we are confined to that core, and that puts pressure on us, that puts pressure on our relationships, that puts pressure on these muscles that we use when we are in the center, because they simply don't get a break. They don't get a chance to recharge, to relax. They are constantly on. So they get overexposed, they get overused, and there's too much pressure on those parts of our social ability, those parts of our social life. And at the same time, we miss this social interaction and the chemicals that come from that, the well-being that comes from that, from being in the other roles. We miss out on that. It isn't happening anymore. So if the screens don't provide that same relief to the brain, we are overexposed to the core of our social relationships and underexposed to everything that's out of the core. And that leads to an inability to recharge. For introverts, there is too much time in the core. There's too much time in that busyness of that core if there's more people there. So there's nowhere to hide. There is no place to be by yourself. Like when you're driving to work, for an introvert, that can be an amazing time because it's time spent by yourself with your own thoughts. When you are taking a walk during your lunch break, for an introvert, that is recharge time. And we don't get that anymore. We are locked in our core with other people, which can be really, really tiring for an introvert. For an extrovert, being outside in those other layers and having that social interaction is what recharges them. And we don't have that happening either. So even for extroverts, this is really, really hard, because all those interactions with colleagues, with friends, face to face, even with people that you see on the street, when all of that kind of disappears, they miss out on that recharge time as well. And then there's the people who live alone, who are now overexposed to the absence of people there, which is really, really hard, unless it's something that you really enjoy being on your own all the time. And from my experience, there's only very, very few people who truly choose and want to live like that. So a lot of the people who live on their own, now that their world has become so small and they don't get the social interaction in these outer layers, are also experiencing that as really difficult and lonely, which is very understandable. So as a result of that, I think most people what we are finding after several weeks of lockdown is this inability to recharge, this inability to use our social muscles in a way that is balanced and healthy and gives us a good break from using some of these muscles, allows them to recharge and restore so that we can come back to these roles. We are overexposed in our core social relationships, and we are underexposed in any social relationship outside of that. Now, as a result, I think that a lot of people are really feeling that emotionally. Relationships are becoming under pressure. People are struggling with signs of depression. Marriages are under pressure. Parenting relationships are under pressure. And it's really not easy because at the moment there is very little escaping that. So in more extreme cases, but unfortunately I'm seeing that more and more, and I think the numbers that we're seeing coming out confirm that, in the worst case scenario, that can lead to things like suicide, things like extreme depression, extreme loneliness, domestic abuse, all these terrible, terrible things that are so unfortunate and so tragic in the situation that we are in right now. And I think these are things that are not getting the attention that they deserve and that they really need. Now, there is no quick solution to this, but there are some things that might be helpful. And one of the things that I want to suggest is that we don't just think about self-care, because self-care is really important in times like these, but that we include into that this concept of social care, looking after your social needs and acknowledging and realizing that through a screen, you're not going to get the same chemical reactions that your brain so craves and that it normally gets so frequently from social interactions outside of your home. And social care, essentially what it comes down to is getting the oxytocin flowing. Oxytocin is our chemical that is responsible for our relationships, when we feel connected, when we feel like we're really connected to people. And that can be through a conversation, it can be through just making eye contact, it can be in lots of different ways. But I think at the core, what a lot of us are experiencing is a lack of that oxytocin. And to protect yourself from that, there's a couple of things that I think can be useful and that I would like to recommend. The first one is making sure that you get enough physical touch. And, you know, with the people that are with you in that core of your bubble, make sure that you touch them, that you hug them. Another thing that gets oxytocin going is real eye contact. And I'm afraid you can't get that through the screen in the same way that you can in real life. But when you are at the supermarket, when you are walking down the street, make sure that you make good eye contact with people. Smiling is another one. It triggers oxytocin for you and for the person who you're smiling at. Giving gifts is another one. If you make an effort to give a small gift to people that you care about or people that you don't even know, it will trigger oxytocin for you and for them. And a gift doesn't have to be expensive. It can be as simple as making someone a cup of tea or writing them a little note or just buying something for them that you know they would appreciate. Another one that I think is also really important is, for a lot of people, there seems to almost be this undercurrent happening, which I can only define as having a fear of people. And I think that is really understandable because of the messaging that we keep getting about the situation that we're in. And because of that, I think it's really important to consider reducing or limiting the messaging that you get that might unintentionally put it in your mind that people are dangerous. And it's almost like we have this innate tendency and need to connect, but now because of everything that's going on, we go, oh, but maybe we shouldn't. And yes, I think we need to follow guidelines and all of that, but this thinking and feeling, even if it's subconscious, that people are dangerous and that we should withdraw, I think will have really negative consequences in the long term. So in the way that you expose yourself to information, I think it's really useful to consider that and to consider that these messages might actually have a deep impact in your ability and your desires to connect, whilst that connection is so essential for mental health and well-being. So to conclude, I think it's really useful to understand that we are social beings, and we are social beings at our very core. Our whole brain is built on that social connection that normally goes from the center of your social circles all the way to the outskirts and then back. And now that we cannot have that movement anymore, now that we're kind of stuck here in the core, it makes perfect sense that in the core things get under pressure and get challenging, and those muscles get overstretched and overused, and that we really miss these interactions that normally happen outside of that nucleus and that inner core. And one way to make sure that you keep your mental and emotional and social health is to do it intentionally and to find creative ways that you can look after your social needs. And that's what I want to leave you with. We are running an online mindfulness course that talks about lots of different techniques in terms of self-care, but also mindful connection. So if that's something that you're interested in, feel free to have a look on our website, renewyourmind.co.nz, and you can find all the information there. Thank you for your time.